Saturday night is senior night. It's time to say goodbye to some of our favorite Knights.
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of every single day. Turn us on, turn us up, we'll turn it out. I'm here with my good friend, James Duncan, UCF sports commentator extraordinaire, to talk a little UCF football here. On today's show, we're going to talk about our guy, Myles. This is his last home game as a UCF Knight, on senior night at that. In this next part of the show, we're going to talk about improving this staff potentially for year two. How do we feel like they did? And, where can UCF make some improvements? And then we're going to end the show talking about how we get the best out of Taven Jackson and whether that version of him is good enough to quarterback this team next year. Let's start at the top here. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, our title sponsor. They are the official betting partner of the NBA. New customers can bet just $5 and get up to $300 in bonus bets if that bet wins. Head on over to FanDuel.com, download the app, join today. James, Myles Montgomery is a UCF Knight through and through. I think he embodies what it means to be a UCF Knight. This is his last home game. He is somebody that Scott Frost praised in the preseason. His work ethic, he's a great teammate. He is a great student athlete all the way around, just a good person. Talk to me a little bit about his fond farewell, but what this means. I mean, you've seen a few senior nights in your days. You know a lot of these guys personally. How emotional is this last home game for Myles and some of his other teammates who we'll talk about here, who are going into their last game as UCF Knights at home?
Yeah, Myles got to do the day one press conferences of this week going into senior night, and you could tell that despite being banged up from the previous two games, he said, it's going to be what it is. And you could tell that there were some emotions behind that, and that, it was going to be this sort of bittersweet ending. I feel like Myles is one of those guys that reps UCF really hard, through the lows and the highs. Unfortunately, hasn't gotten to really experience a lot of highs here. He said his favorite touchdown was his first touchdown when he caught the ball and he was still standing, and he kind of just realized he might have some room, and then he made a couple moves, hit a guy, and got in the end zone. Kind of reminiscing on last year when he got here. And then he also mentioned, and I think this is really important for people to realize, is as much as me and Mike hop on here and we either get super hyped up or complain about the UCF Knights, these guys are people. And one of these moments that really made you think about that was Myles talking about how he wasn't really in a great place before coming here.
Yeah.
And he talked about that in the press conference. He said, UCF made me a better person. Being at UCF made me happier, and being at UCF really made me closer with my family. And I think that's something that's underrated a lot about college football, is that you go away sometimes, often very far from your family, and you might change, or you might get in a rut and not be able to, feel like you can get out. And that's something that we saw with Myles, is he was able to not only be a better player, but he was able to kind of be happier and be just a better version of himself, which I think is really cool. You feel the emotions on senior night, and you want the football to be great too. And I think we're going to see good football from Myles.
Yeah. You said something that was important there that I think it's just something to think about. This is a little bit of different episode that we got going here tonight, but as we mentioned, Saturday night is senior night, so it's a time to kind of reflect on what it means to be a part of this UCF community. And community, James, I can tell you, is everything to me. Um, when I was down and out, my community saved me, right? And the fact that he talked about how he was not in a not so good place before he came here, and the community, you know, took him in. It gave him a sense of purpose and family and belonging. That's something that's really, really important. And you know, it's something that I think recruits feel when they come on their visit, and they have another player host them, and you can tell when a guy believes in it and when a guy's selling you. And Myles Montgomery is a guy who believes in it because it changed him. You know, I love listening to athlete stories. I like, that we have on this channel. We've already had Kane Archer on a few times, and in getting to know him as a person, I can tell you he is going to embrace that part of what it means to be a UCF Knight, and he's going to embody that, and he's going to exemplify that in everything that he does on and off the field. It is important to get good football players, but I think it's also important that as you come to the end of this journey, you are producing good people. And Myles and his teammates, some of these other guys, we put together a list. Talk to me about some of the other guys who, again, this is going to be their final game at home as a UCF Knight, but it's senior night, and I think they deserve to be recognized here and celebrated.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've been a UCF fan for more than 3 or 4 years, you're gonna hear some of these names and be a little upset. But yeah, Myles Montgomery, this is his last year. Nigel Leak, potentially, this is most likely this is his last year. Malachi Lawrence, who's been here, for a very long time. This is his last year. Cam Kenny, who's been with us for a very long time. This is his last year. And Paul Rubelt, this is also his last year.
Mm.
All of these guys have been with the Knights for 2+ years, and it's definitely sad to see them go. A lot of guys are transferring around, and you get this whole roster turnover, and you brought in a brand new staff, and you really needed guys that believed in the community and believed in the team and believed in the UCF Knights to stay and be an anchor for you guys. And I know this personally. We do not have the biggest NIL budget in the conference. We do not have stuff that makes guys want to stay here just because of the paycheck. When I tell you that most of the guys stay here, a vast majority of the guys stay here because they believe that UCF is their home and they feel at home here.
Mm.
And it is so important that we give these guys a good farewell. I know last year was a really rough season, and no one wanted to go to that Utah game. It was cold, it was rainy, but students and fans still showed up because they wanted to give RJ Harvey and Kobe Hudson their last hurrah. And I really think it's important here for UCF like ambassadors like Myles and Paul Rubelt and Malachi Lawrence and Nigel E. Kelly to like really give those guys like one last like thank you for being here, because those guys are very talented, and they could have easily gone and taken hundreds of thousands of dollars increase at somewhere else, but they stayed here.
Yeah, look, you've got to experience it to kind of understand it on some level. But ultimately, where UCF is at right now is you produce some really good football players, but you produce some really good people, and I think that their achievements both on and off the field deserve to be recognized and celebrated. Hopefully, James, we can celebrate an achievement on the field Saturday with UCF beating Oklahoma State. But look, these guys can't do it on their own. These coaches have to set them up for success. And after the break, I want to talk about this staff and the job that they've done, potentially setting these guys up for success. Do we like them? Should you move on from some guys if you're Scott Frost? We'll talk about that next on Locked on UCF. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by FanDuel, the official betting partner of the NBA. Guys, the NBA is back, and we couldn't be more excited here at Locked On because it is our chance to get in on the action with our friends at FanDuel. Even if you missed the start of the game and you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who scores next to fourth quarter comebacks. It makes everything more exciting, and you don't want to miss a second of the action. Download the FanDuel app today. FanDuel is giving new customers $300 off if your first $5 bet wins. You can't beat that. That's $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Head over to FanDuel.com, sign up, and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. James, I was told that Alex Grinch was going to be the worst coordinator hire ever in the history of coordinator hires. And he wasn't. This defense was pretty good to great at times. Now, we talked about this earlier this week. UCF doesn't have a good win on the schedule this year, but they don't have a bad loss either, in my opinion. I think you won the games that you were supposed to win, and some of them more impressively than a lot of people thought they would win. It felt like I wasn't alone in saying that I felt like UCF was going to blow North Carolina out. They did it. You got another really bad team coming into the bounce house this week in Oklahoma State. I think that they will do what they've done to those types of opponents all season and winning and it not being close. 14.5 spread on this one. I think it opened at 13.5, moved to 14.5. But the defense is a big reason why UCF has been able to have the success that they've had against those not so great opponents. Talk to me about this staff, man. And I want to make sure we set some guidelines here for this. The offensive line is off limits in this conversation. I know they haven't played great, but they lost their position coach, tragically, and we want to make sure that we're sensitive to that. So I'm not critiquing offensive line coaching in this, but everywhere else, how do we feel the wide receivers are playing? How do we, Cooper, how do we feel about him as offensive coordinator? I think Alex Grinch might have been the best hire if we're just rating it based on what they've done this year. But talk to me about how you feel about this staff. If you're Scott Frost, who stays and who goes?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if at this point you're deciding who's going.
Okay.
I think definitely you want to decide who needs to stay, and that is 100% Alex Grinch. I think he's got just this great attacking the ball mindset. I think another guy that has done really well this year is Brandon Harris, who's the defensive backs coach. Kenny Martin has done phenomenal coaching the defensive tackles. Mike Dawson, who's the defensive run game coordinator, but he also, is working with the edges, but he's also got two of the best edges in the conference. So that does help you there. And Kenny Martin's got some great defensive tackles. So that helps him there a lot. Coach Mark, who does the works with the linebackers, he's done really well this year, and they've had a lot of little nippy injuries at linebacker, and guys that you thought were going to have big seasons like Kelly Lawson might have not really showed up as much as you anticipated this year, but still played a key role in some good wins. Definitely that big block in the block at the field goal in the Jack State game in the beginning of the year, and then a couple other key moments as well. You definitely can't say that Kelly didn't play a good role this year. Guys like Cole Kozlowski, what a way to go out there and find a kid who is just going to work his tail off for you. Kaz came from Colgate, guys. They got this kid from Colgate, and he is playing elite at the linebacker position in Power 5 football. That's
Okay.
just good scouting. That's just knowing ball. So good for Coach Mark. Same with Lewis Carter. Lewis Carter, if you guys have been UCF fans for a while, plays a little bit like Jason Johnson from a couple years ago, who kind of just flew around. I definitely just want to give like my props to a lot of these defensive coaches who have just done really well. I think overall, you want to just see all the offensive coaches do a little better. I think we thought we started to see the McKenzie Milton effect in the first 3 games, and you were thinking, maybe things were progressing, and then you see this regression. Same with Coach Sean Beckton, who is a former UCF Knight, but definitely wide receiver unit struggled a little bit this year.
Let's talk about McKenzie Milton for a second. This was probably one of the more popular hire, if not the most popular hire of all the coaches. The hometown hero, the former quarterback at the helm of the undefeated 2017 team, just 28 years old, man. So he's a very, very young coach in this game. His former coach giving him a chance to break into major college coaching. But how do we rate the job that he's done with these quarterbacks here? I mean, he's just like a few years older than a lot of the guys that he's coaching, right? Like they both got 2s in front of their names. So that's all I'm saying. However, I would not say quarterback play has been great.
I wouldn't say it's been good.
Yeah, I would, but again, there are reasons. There's context around that, right? Again, offensive line play at times in pass protection, especially, left a lot to be desired. For guys who are trying to find their footing, that could be tough. But you picked Cam Fancher to start this thing. For by all accounts, I think Taven Jackson has played better than Cam Fancher. When Cam, we have a smaller sample size for Cam Fancher.
Yeah.
However, it was telling to me that after he got healthy, they didn't immediately go back to him.
Yeah.
So those guys were closer on paper. And look, credit to Scott Frost. He told us that, coming into the season, he said, it was a close race. And I think it's going to be really important that they take a look at the job that's being done here and decide whether guys are developing, because in today's college football, if you don't have a quarterback, you're screwed, man. And you got to have a quarterback. It changes everything about your system when a guy who you pick to be the starter can't execute certain aspects of the offense or can't make certain throws. And your offense will expand or shrink based on quarterback play. Your playbook will expand or shrink based on quarterback play. If McKenzie Milton in tandem with Scott Frost if they're not doing a good job developing these guys, you're in trouble here, man, in the future. And I want to see the Kane Archers of the world develop at UCF.
Yeah.
You have to be in a place where you are not expecting a quarterback to come in and save you. You need to be saving quarterbacks. Do you think McKenzie Milton has done a good job this year? And, if it doesn't look better next year, do you start to reevaluate that position? I'm not questioning his acumen at all. So if you're listening to this, I want you to hear that I'm questioning his acumen. He knows more football probably than you and I forgot. You know what I mean? He played it. He's been in it. He's done it.
Yeah.
But guys have to develop, and you got to keep an eye on this, I think, if you're Scott Frost.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, it was definitely a tall task this year. And I honestly don't think that Cam Fancher was necessarily the wrong play. We've gone back and forth quite a bit this season, and I think it's just because the results have been very back and forth. Cam Fancher, when you look at Taven's game, especially the past couple games, you've kind of seen, I think, what maybe the staff saw in camp, and that is that Taven is very one-dimensional. There's not a ton of deep ball presence there. He's really been just struggling on finding the accuracy or the power on the deep ball. It's a lot of dink and dunking, and it's not a lot of running. Now, that's gotten progressively worse over the season, and that could be due to injury. He has gotten nicked quite a bit this season. He had a separated shoulder at one point. So, you can't necessarily blame the kid for that performance. He has been getting put in really tough spots. You've also, Cam Fancher concussed the first game, now had 2 broken ribs, is most likely, you're not going to see him the rest of the season, probably taking a medical red shirt to eventually have another year of college football. Same with Jacuri Brown. Jacurri is a guy that comes into the game and immediately the playbook shrinks, right? It shrinks and it expands in the running game. The same way with Taven, the passing game expands, or at least the screen game expands. And then the running game evaporates for the QB run. And so, you see your playbook shrink and expand in different ways. You wanted a guy that could do a little bit of both. And I think you had that with Cam more than you had it with anybody else on the roster. I think Davi will end up growing into the quarterback that is able to throw. And I think that's what UCF needs in terms of if he's going to be fighting for a roster spot next year or a QB spot next year. But, Scott even joked about it. He said, if there ends up being a situation where we need to go to another quarterback, he goes, I'm only 50. He said, we can go get McKenzie out there, just can't run too many running plays because of his leg. And then I'm not sure who asked this question, so I apologize if you're watching, but they said, if it comes down to it, are you guys working with another player on the team that can at least, take snaps at quarterback that might have played it in high school? And they said yes. So, Mike, there is currently someone on the team that is taking snaps at quarterback that was not taking snaps at quarterback to start the year because there is not enough depth, because these guys are not going to be playing. You are not going to have Cam. You are not going to have Jacurri. Right now, you have Taven, who is, shaken up. He's hurt. You've got Davi, who's, obviously a very running first quarterback. And then you've got Brock Hansel, the walk-on. So, it's hard to look at that and be like, Mackenzie Milton, this is all your fault. But I haven't necessarily feel like I've seen any development this year.
Well, look, as I mentioned, Taven is the guy. He has been the guy. He should be the guy versus Oklahoma State. We're going to talk about whether we've seen the best of Taven Jackson next, right here on Locked On UCF. Is this the best we've seen of Taven Jackson, and or can they squeeze more out of him? As we approach the end of the season, I don't know how much we take away from a gangbusters performance versus Oklahoma State. As I mentioned, they are impressively bad, and not just. I mean, metaphorically speaking, however you want to look at it, statistically speaking, in a very literal sense, they are almost at the bottom of the Big 12 in every statistical category that matters. And in a couple of them, they're maybe like, I don't know, like 14th out of 16 teams. They're just bad. So I you can't really use this as a barometer for whether Taven is going to be the guy that's going to win you the big game or not. But UCF has what I think is the blessing of being able to finish against a team that would be considered a solid signature win for Scott Frost and BYU at the end of the season. Look, you got to go there, and UCF's not going to be favored, nor should they be. I'm telling you right now, I'm probably not going to pick them to win that game, but if you're going to win it, it's going to be because your playmakers step up and make plays. And I think that starts at quarterback with Taven Jackson. This team has kind of gone as he has gone this year. But when it's all said and done, if you're Scott Frost, you've got to make a decision about what you want to do here in terms of this roster now. He can return. Um, you've got the young guy, Kane Archer, coming in. You've got Dante Carr coming in, but you're unlikely to be in a position where you're going to start a true freshman at quarterback next year in year two, which means you need to have a guy, either an incumbent or you're bringing in another guy from the portal to potentially be the starter for next year while you get the young guys ready. Um, I've talked about the importance of making a bowl game. I think it is important. You get the extra practices. Kane Archer is going to be an early enrollee, so he can get those practices before the spring, practicing with the team in bowl prep. Do you think we've seen the best of Taven? Because if you have, you're hitting the portal hard for a QB here. If you haven't, you still may be hitting the portal, but maybe with a different strategy. I don't know, man. It would have been nice if somebody would have risen to the top to at least give you 2 years starting at quarterback, where unquestioned, and then you go into your recruiting bag because you groomed a guy to be the starter once those guys are done, and hopefully that guy's Kane Archer or Dante Carr. Kane Archer, I think we will both agree, is probably right now is the better of the two quarterbacks. But I'm not. Dante understands what he has to do to improve because the staff told him as much. They said, "Hey, look, we don't feel like you're a starting Big 12 quarterback right now, but here are the things that we feel like you can improve, and we can see the vision, and we got a plan for you to develop." I'm just trying to figure out if UCF is are you leaning toward move on from Taven Jackson and let's just hit the portal and find somebody else, or you know what, maybe with another offseason with these guys he could develop even more and be a guy that can get you through year two?
Yeah, I'm probably leaning, you go portal. And I think having a reliable backup is something that should be unquestioned. Like if you told me next year that Taven Jackson was going to be a developed backup, QB2 for the UCF Knights, I would feel better about next year. UCF has not had a backup quarterback. Like UCF has not had a starting quarterback all the way through a season in the past 5-6 years,
Yeah.
maybe 7 years. They have a backup is played, whether it was because of injury or they lost the starting job in the past 6 or 7 years. Like it has been ages. So I really truthfully think that having a quarterback that is good enough to be your starter or has played as a starter in college football is so valuable. And I think you get another season under Taven's belt, like finish out this season and he develops and he's QB2 next year. He probably, he might probably sees game action at some point. I think it's important, I think if he wants to stay here, I think that's going to be the route to his success. I just don't see Jacurri. I'm a big Jacurri fan. Like him as a person, him as a young man, and him as a player, I'm a big fan. I just don't think this is the offense for him. I actually think that he's more suited in a Army or Navy or
Really?
Gus Malzahn style offense
Okay.
because he is probably I'm not kidding you when I'm saying this. He is probably the best athlete on the team. Like genuinely. He is
I can buy
probably
that.
the most athletic person on the team. He is just not built for this kind of sling offense. And if his arm was just a little bit more accurate, I would say absolutely. But his decision making on the ground is phenomenal, and I think he would be really successful somewhere else. So, and I think very similar things of Cam Fancher. But I don't know. I'm interested to see what happens with Taven. But I think you probably go portal and I can say this, because this year's over, this past year's over and everything, this offseason was over. We went and, probably spent, ballpark between keeping all of the quarterbacks this year, roughly $1.5 to $2 million. That is
info there.
That's not a lot of money for a Power 5 program. A lot of these Power 5 programs are shelling that out per quarterback. And it is very important for us to realize that if we want to be good, we have to maybe, take some of this money and put it together and maybe just go chase one big guy. And if you bust, you bust. And I understand that sucks to hear. But this game is getting expensive, and that is how it's going to be. Unfortunately, I think you probably go portal. And that's my answer.
Yeah, I'm with you. I
Yeah.
think I'm leaning toward portal, and find a guy. Look, I mean, this is not groundbreaking stuff here. You need to go try to improve your roster every offseason. That means getting the best guys available to come in. There was a former college quarterback that we've interviewed quite a bit here. I've interviewed a few times in my time covering sports. He was having a conversation with former Oklahoma quarterback Jason White. Jason White won the Heisman at Oklahoma in the early 2000s. But he said Jason White told him, look, man, they're always trying to bring somebody in that's better than you. It doesn't even matter if you just won the Heisman. They think that somebody's better than you, they're going to play that guy. So you can't afford to rest on your laurels and get comfortable, because the next guy's coming for your job, man, and he wants it. Everybody at this level wants it as much as you do. You have to move as if that's the case, and you got to work your butt off here. And so if you're Taven Jackson, you got to know, look, man, they are potentially looking for somebody to replace me, and I haven't done anything to date to dissuade them from that notion. So it's time to get to work. And, hopefully, we see improved play here over these last two games. And maybe, James, even a signature win that would make it a little easier for the coaching staff to say it's there, right? It feels like every QB, that's coming up through the ranks has that breakthrough game where it just all seems to click and then they never turn back. I would say maybe for Joe Burrow, like a Joe Burrow type, that game might have been against UCF.
And absolutely after that hit,
after that hit, he became Joe Burrow.
Yeah,
Dave Peasy, and I can tell you, I ain't go to LSU. I'm not an LSU fan. Joe Burrow is one of my favorite college quarterbacks of all time. And, what they did coming back on UCF in that game and, doing all the things they did in that game, look, it just felt, remember, this was a guy that was third on somebody's roster. He was at Ohio State, and they thought that he was not the best guy, and he might be the best college quarterback ever. 60 touchdowns he threw in that championship season. But it took that game for it to click for him. It was always in him, but it clicked here. And I'm wondering if these guys, and I'm not saying that UCF has a potential Joe Burrow on the roster for people losing on me in the comments, but is there a guy who has got that potential inside of him? And could BYU be the game where it clicks? Or if you get to a bowl game, you get that extra game, you just never know how it could change the destiny of a certain player or a team. And your kids, getting a bowl game matters, man. I don't care what anybody says, because you get that one more opportunity to get your guys out there to compete and for it to click.
Absolutely.
And if it does, man, who knows here? I'm excited about what next season could be. They've got 2 more games left in this season. I'm not writing them off completely versus BYU, but certainly something's going to need to click for Taven Jackson if they're going to win that football game. James Duncan, UCF sports commentator, I want to thank you for joining me on today's show. Guys, we want to hear from you. Hit the comments after the video. Give us your favorite Myles Montgomery moment. Paul Rubel, I think, is on that list as well, too. Give us your favorite moment for these guys who are going to be out there on senior night. We want to hear from you. Tell us what you think about this staff. Who should stay? Who should go? And do you think we've seen the best of Taven Jackson? Again, hit the comments. Let us know what you think on everything that we talked about today, because we're going to be back with you here tomorrow to talk about more on Locked On UCF.